Oh, my.
And I got to Monterey Wednesday at about. noon.
Oh, Moses.
Yeah, so almost a week, but I.
And the ferry obviously takes cars.
Okay, I'm going to share my.
Hello from the peanut gallery.
Hello, welcome everybody. We pause here at the Montreal Peace and Justice Center in Seaside, California, to recognize and acknowledge the indigenous people of this land, the Aoni Costanoan Essenen Nation. We remember their continued existence and connection to this region and give thanks to them for allowing us to live, work, and gather in their traditional homeland. We recognize the enduring relationship that exists between indigenous peoples and their traditional lands, and we offer our respect to their elders and to all the Aoni people of the past and present. This event is co-sponsored by the Peace Coalition of Montreal County and Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. The speaker is Dr. Sharat Lin, is a research fellow with Initiative for Equality and Human Agenda. He holds a PhD medical physics. He writes and lectures on global political economy, labor migration, social movements, and public health. He has started, produced, owned a cooperative in Spain, Cuba, Venezuela, India, and the United States. He has observed firsthand many temporary experiments in self-organization as well as state enterprises in both capitalist, socialist, and hybrid states. And so I would like to invite Dr. Sharat Lin. But before that, let me introduce you the Montreal Peace and Justice Center. It is founded in 2004, and its mission is to inspire and mobilize the people of Montreal County to cultivate peace, social justice, nonviolence, democracy, and environmental sustainability in our community and the world through education and advocacy. Here, welcome, Dr. Lin.
Well, thank you very much, Sylvia. And thank you very much to the Monterey Peace and Justice Center, the WILP of Monterey County, and the Peace Coalition of Monterey County. It's always delightful to be back here, and I'm so delighted that we are at least trying to meet in person. It's so wonderful to have that human connection. And I just took off my mask. I can assure everyone I have been triple vaccinated for 2 months, so I should be okay. Anyway, I've been asked to talk today about cooperative economics, and you know, I'm not actually an expert in worker-owned cooperatives, other than what I have seen but I am also a political economist, and so I analyze what are known as the relations of production. And the relations of production, of course, are the socioeconomic basis of society. Is how is wealth produced? To whom does it benefit? Who produces that wealth? And these are the essential questions that sort of underlie equality or inequality from a socioeconomic perspective in society. Now, before I get into the heart of this topic, I wanted to relate to you a few of my personal experiences, which sort of struck me as being not necessarily examples of cooperative economics, but examples, first of all, of cooperation. I want to start from sort of the bigger picture and then come into the cooperative economics. So there are several situations that I have experienced that illustrate to me that a large number of people, I'm talking about a grouping that is much greater than an affinity group, and over a period of time that is much more than just simply one meeting, right? It takes place over several days, several weeks, in some cases even for many months. And these are the large gatherings like I saw in Tahrir Square during the Egyptian uprising in 2011. And what I saw in 2011 was that you had hundreds of thousands of people in this square. This is actually a gigantic roundabout with nine major streets converging on that roundabout. And it has over Egypt's recent history become a symbolic center of democratic protest, where people gather in an iconic place to protest. It's just like Lafayette Park in front of the White House, or City Hall in San Jose or in San Francisco. And you had hundreds of thousands of people gathering there beginning on January 26th in 2011. And they created a space which was very unusual for a country like Egypt. And it was a space where people cooperated with each other. There were no assaults. There were, women were protected. No woman was sexually abused in Tahrir Square during the time of the protests, and in particular in the time after February the 3rd, when the square became a protected zone, in the sense that the protesters created a perimeter around the square where they checked people going in. They asked for an ID, and then they asked to do a pat down to make sure that the square was a weapons-free zone. And we see people cleaning up the streets, cleaning up their mess. And so at the end of the day, there's just no litter in the square. When people were injured, there were 5 clinics that were set up in the square, just treating people for free who happened to be injured, or who may have had some kind of medical issue. And so it was a spirit of cooperation. And so I thought about, is this a model for a cooperative society? And more recently, well, let's skip that. So more recently, I was just about a month and a half ago, I was in Black Rock. I had gone to the Burning Man festival, and the Burning Man has been canceled for 2 years in a row because of COVID. I said, I want to see this, you know, I've heard a lot about it, and I want to see this. And I get there, and first of all, the whole atmosphere is a little bit unusual because it's for two reasons. One, because it's not a regular Burning Man. It's an unofficial gathering. But as an unofficial gathering, still it's about 10,000 people gathering in the desert, and but these people who are gathering according to the 10 principles upon which the Burning Man Festival is organized. And it includes, you know, cooperation, respect for others, leave no trace, and of course the radical self-reliance. And you see all of these principles in practice, and nowhere do I see a single piece of litter or trash left on the playa, as it's called, the desert floor. So I thought, okay, isn't this another interesting example of cooperation, where you can take not this is well beyond an affinity group. I went there not knowing anyone else who was there. So this is with 10,000 people. It was, you know, but still I saw how people respected others' spaces. They were very free about, you know, expressing themselves, because this is in many ways an art festival, and a lot of things where people were just handing out for free or doing free yoga and just sharing something of themselves. So I thought this was a very interesting model, and I've begun to ask myself, you know, why can't we create that kind of society here in our own cities, in our countryside, and, you know, in the larger society? Why is it that every society on earth, in some measure or another, has inequality, has a hierarchy, has oppression, and a lack of some measure of lack of respect for others? So, you know, we all know today that no system, no economic system has created more inequality than capitalism. Even if you go back 1,000, 2,000 years ago to pre-capital society, there was inequality. There was feudalism. Feudalism created inequality, and, you know, all kinds of pre-capitalist systems after the primitive communalism. After that, you know, created inequality, but nothing compared to the inequality that we see under the capital system, and then magnified even more so under colonialism and then imperialism. And so humankind has been looking for alternatives to the capitalist system, alternatives to systems that inherently generate this kind of inequality, and that inequality then, you know, leads to crime. It leads to violence. We know, for example, that the societies that have the highest level of violence per capita, like Brazil, like South Africa, this is correlated with these countries having some of the highest Gini coefficients in the world. In other words, Gini coefficient is a measure of economic inequality. And so the most unequal societies are the most violent, have the highest crime rates. The most equal societies, like Sweden, Finland, Iceland, are very peaceful. I went to Iceland. I never saw a gun in the whole time that I was there, and I didn't see crime. I didn't see litter. So, you know, there's something to this, but I think that there's, you know, as we get into this time, we see that there's also a lot more. So, this, by the way, 2021 is exactly the 150th anniversary of the Paris Commune. And so the Paris Commune, of course, is a notable event where people were trying to create a model of society which was free from exploitation, which was totally democratic, was participatory, and was people sharing power and decision making. And one of the things that comes out of this is that, well, I mean, there was the whole emergence of Marxism and the analysis of the nature of capitalist society, and the response is to create an alternative, which many of us have come to know now as socialism, and also the doctrine of communism. Communism being the ideal. It's a goal. It's a very distant goal. A distant goal of creating a mass society that has no class. No class. So that means there's no fundamental, there's no qualitative differentiation between one person, one human being, and another. And so of course we had the first socialist revolution in Russia in 1917, and it led to a very centralized state apparatus. It led to a very complete transformation of the relations of production. Relations of production being the social relations of human beings to the production process. And the relationship, I mean, the classical analysis of capitalism is that you have really two fundamental classes. The capitalists who own the means of production, and the workers or the laborers who sell their labor power in that production process. And today, I think that we come to understand that there's a lot more. There's a lot more complexity to modern day society than simply two polar classes. And there's a movement, among other things, to create worker-owned cooperatives, so where the economic enterprises are controlled and owned not by a few, but by all the people who participate in the production process in that enterprise. So that's what I'm going to focus on today. But before I do that, I want to address that earlier question about whether or not the models of Tahrir Square and Burning Man are any kind of a relevant example. So I thought about this for a long time, and I realized that there are several conditions that are very special to these situations. So one of the preconditions in both Tahrir Square and in Black Rock is that the people who gathered in these places, or who were allowed to gather, shared a common purpose. They shared a recognition and acknowledgement of the principles upon which these people gathered. And in the case of Black Rock, it's easy. You have the 10 principles. The second thing is that there is a sort of a price of admission. So in other words, not everybody can just simply get there casually or be there casually. In the case of Tahrir, you could walk in, you could make trouble, but then you are one person in tens of thousands or 100,000. If you do something wrong, the whole mass of people will just pounce on you, and they did. In the case of Black Rock, it's way off in the desert, and you have to have the time and the means to get there, and also the sort of the know-how, the equipment to camp there with radical self-reliance. That means that providing your own, whatever it is, portable toilet, you have to bring your own water, all of your food, you have to prepare your own food there. So you have to be totally self-reliant. And so that is sort of that plus the distance is a cost of admission that is sort of the gatekeeper to the people who gather. So it's not the people who gather in these places, whether it is Tahrir or in Black Rock, are not a representative cross-section of our total society. They are people who agree on the principles upon which these gatherings are happening, and they just voluntarily follow the rules, the etiquette, the protocols of those places. Second issue is that neither in Tahrir Square nor in Black Rock is there a cash economy. Okay? So there is nobody goes there to make money. And so there is essentially, although there is value created by cleaning things up, by providing medical services, or even like in Black Rock, just entertaining, right? And just making it enjoyable for people. That has value, but nobody is going there asking for money for that. And so there really isn't a money economy. There really isn't, therefore, an economy for that matter. And that's the other key. Is that when we introduce the economy, then there are the almost inevitable issues about what the price should be. Are the contracts fulfilled, or they're not fulfilled, or the goods that are delivered, or the services delivered, what they are promised to be, and so forth. So a lot of the issues that we have in the greater society are not there in these cashless economies, or non-economies, really. And even if you say that, there's also the concept of the gift economy, where each can give based upon what they have skills. I sometimes donate my services because I have certain skills that the community needs. I have some fruit trees and I have too many plums, and so I just give them away. And so that's sort of the idea of the gift economy. But the gift economy does not, I think, in modern day society, in mass society, is not really going to be able to provide for the needs of a mass society, because there's a need to transport some of the goods and services some distance away, and it's just a very complex system that would be required if we had to try to do it without money, or if we even tried to do it on a barter basis. So these are sort of idealized situations that do not represent the real society, but give us some notion that human beings can do the right thing under the right conditions. Okay, so I wanted to now focus on cooperatives, which are worker-owned cooperatives. The first thing I want to point out is that the socialist revolutions in the Soviet Union, in China, in Cuba, in all of these countries, Vietnam, the one thing that they did not create were worker-owned cooperatives. Right? Now, in China, there were the communes, and the communes were in some sense cooperative in the sense that they took these the individual peasants, brought them together, and the land was brought into the commons, and that land was worked by peasants together. So there was a certain aspect of cooperativization and collectivization of the means of production in agriculture, which is mainly the land. But there are, there never have been any, legal constructions in China, even less so in the Soviet Union, even, not in Cuba. I only, it was only in the last 10 years that I really began studying the issue of cooperatives, worker-owned cooperatives in Cuba. And there have been some in Cuba, but those were entirely in agriculture. And then of course there also are the other kind of cooperatives which are not worker-owned cooperatives, but rather like purchasing cooperatives or selling cooperatives. So what that means, so in the political economic terms, when the key feature of the worker-owned cooperative is that the worker owners of this economic entity are engaged together in the process of production, in the production of goods and or services. And in the case of the buying cooperatives, the selling cooperatives, the consumer cooperatives, those sorts, the cooperativization of ownership revolves around the means of exchange, not the means of production, right? Because it's about trade. It's about okay, the cooperative has this stock of goods that it will sell to its members at a fixed, at a predictable price, right? Or it will acquire for its farmer members the agricultural inputs for their farms, for their individual farms, at a guaranteed price. That's what these purchasing and selling cooperatives do. And so Marx always said that production is fundamental. It's much more fundamental than exchange. But exchange is also a relation, which I call a relation of exchange. So what we see is that even in these socialist countries or self-proclaimed socialist countries, and some people would disagree that they were really socialists. They were socialist in some respect. But none of these countries developed, certainly not outside of agriculture, worker-owned or farmer-owned cooperatives. So that was the interesting thing. Now the question is why is that so? And some of it I think has to do with the circumstances of the first revolution, the revolution in Russia. And it had to do in part because Russia faced two crises, right? After the three crises, right? So after the revolution, there was the revolt of the wealthy peasants, the kulaks, and then you had the Great Depression, and then you had the Second World War, which the Russians knew as the Great Patriotic War. These were three epic challenges to the new Soviet state, and so particularly in the latter two, particularly in the Great Depression, and then the Second World War, there was an absolute need to ramp up production rapidly, and the feeling was at the time that this could only be done through a centralized model of state ownership of the means of production. That was one reason, but the other reason was because Stalin had the concept that the most socialist form of organization is a collective ownership, not by the workers of the enterprise, but rather by the collective ownership, at least in theory. In theory, it is the collective ownership of all the members of the entire society, and that's what that is the theoretical, anyway, definition of a state-owned enterprise. The problem is, of course, that a state-owned enterprise has its own hierarchy, and the state bureaucracy has its own sort of autonomy, independent of the people, particularly when there are no real elections and circumstances do not permit elections. So so we were left with examples of state-owned enterprises being in some ways, not every way, but in some ways, not very different from capitalist enterprises, in the sense that the workers in those enterprises feeling alienation in the same way that workers in capitalist enterprise feel. So anyway, within the rest of the world, this map shows you the green circles. I'll give you some idea of where, and of course it's an old map, 2014, of where worker-owned cooperatives are located. And the United States has a big circle because the United States is a big country. But the largest concentration of worker-owned cooperatives is in Europe, and it is certainly not in any of the what we ordinarily know of as the socialist countries or the socialist bloc. And there is a rough correlation between where those worker-owned cooperatives are concentrated versus the index of workers' rights. So this is a map that was published by the International Trade Union Confederation, again in 2014, showing how the countries that the ITUC regarded as having the best record for workers' rights were in Europe. And it's interesting that they rated Russia to be better than the United States. The United States to be sort of in the middle of among the countries in the world. So what's happened? What has happened? I mean, the cooperatives, worker-owned cooperatives, even though the United States has a big circle on the map, the worker-owned cooperatives represent an absolutely tiny, almost infinitesimal part of the U.S. economy. But there is the financial crisis of 2008, the COVID pandemic, the various shocks in the capital system, decisively rising inequality have sparked new interest in forming worker-owned cooperatives. And this is a hearing that was held in San Jose 2 years ago, led by Assemblyman Ash Kalra, to explore, just to acquire some information and feedback from the public about worker-owned cooperatives. So at least there's some interest in learning more about it, and then the impact of this is that, and this is something that people who have successfully formed worker-owned cooperatives in the United States will tell you is that you start a business, if you start a private business, you go to a bank, you need some financing. It's pretty straightforward. The banks routinely make loans and provide financial services to businesses, individually owned businesses. If you go as a worker-owned cooperative, it's complicated, and some banks, even some credit unions, have turned the worker-owned cooperatives away and said that we can't handle it, we don't know how to handle it, and we're just not equipped to give you financing or provide financial services for you. And it also has to do with the nature of the laws. The laws in this country favor private enterprise. They do not favor, they do not have provisions to take into account the special needs of worker-owned cooperatives. So that's one of the things that the state legislature is attempting to learn, is what can we do? What do we need to do as legislators to create a legal environment that is more conducive, that is more favorable to worker-owned cooperatives. Now, in the course of the past few years, one of the organizations that I'm a member of, which is Human Agenda, so one of their, so Human Agenda, you can look it up at humanagenda.net. And it has a set of 5 principles, or the DEX principles. And the DEX principles are democracy, equity, cooperation, kindness, and sustainability. And so that third one, cooperation, is what leads Human Agenda to explore worker-owned cooperatives here and around the world, and seek to gather enough information to help newcomers to emulate these practices and create new cooperatives. And so Human Agenda actually is an incubator, is today an incubator for new cooperatives. It's helping a cooperative of housekeepers. It helped a sustainable landscaping. It's an enterprise that helps convert lawns into drought tolerant gardens, and it's in the process of helping to convert a law office, an immigration office, from a privately owned law office to a cooperative, which is owned by all the people who work in an office. This one here, this pictured here, is the Mendi bakery, and actually there are several branches of it, but this is the one in Oakland. And of course, Mendi is named after the cooperative pioneer in Spain, Jose Maria Arizmendi Arrieta. And I'll talk a little bit more about it later. But so we went and visited this bakery, and they told us about how after it was converted to a worker-owned cooperative, it starts from the principles, because the principles of a private enterprise are that the owner is looking to make a profit. Now, some owners are more benevolent than others, and they will acknowledge, okay, I have to treat my workers well in order for me to make a profit, in order for this business to be sustainable. But the bottom line is the financial sustainability of the business. In the case of a worker-owned cooperative, it has to be sustainable financially, but it also has to be, and this is a founding principle, it also has to serve the people who work there. And so when, like, for example, when someone who works there, has a family emergency, has a sickness or maybe a death in the family, worker-owned cooperatives are much more willing to give extra time off, paid time off, to workers who need it. And it's just an example. The pay difference between the workers in a worker-owned cooperative is much more egalitarian than it is in most any private business. So it starts from those operating principles, but it's an enormous challenge. I mean, they tell us stories about how it's a, you know, they struggle for months to get the paperwork in order to form the cooperative, and then it's about an internal political culture of how do we do collective decision making and carry it out collectively. It's not easy. It's not something that we are born with, and so every worker-owned cooperative goes through that struggle, and so it's just like you know, organizations in the movement. We go through a lot of struggles. We go through transitions and personnel transitions to get there. And then another one is this one is in Sunnyvale called A Slice of New York Pizza, and so this group is, you know, telling very similar stories about how they got started, the challenges. It was a long road to get started. And, you know, today there is a little bit of assistance from the U.S. Federation of Cooperatives, of worker-owned cooperatives. It certainly is a resource for information, for training, for connecting prospective worker-owned cooperatives to resources to help them get started. So this is a sign in the Slice of New York that tells just a little bit about it. It says, Slice of New York evolved our small business to a worker cooperative in July 2017. So it was a conversion from a private business. The worker co-op is a business that is owned and democratically governed by the people who work in it. Worker co-ops create long-term, stable jobs, have sustainable business practices, and are connected and accountable to their community. And you know, that latter one is not necessarily obvious, the connections to the community. And I first saw this in the worker-owned cooperatives that were being created in Venezuela after the 1999 elections, and these were conversions. What was happening in Venezuela was that because a new government had come in that wanted to develop the country along the socialist path, but was willing to allow the capitalist enterprises to remain in place. The capitalists, you know, it took a few years, and then they finally said that, look, this is not going to make enough profits for them. It's going to be an uphill struggle. So what quite a few of the capitalists did was that they sort of they milked their enterprises dry and sent the money overseas, mostly to Miami, and then left these empty factories that were basically gutted. And so the workers in these factories said that, you know, we know how to run these factories if we have a little bit of help from the government to re-equip them and modernize them. So the government came in and said that, okay, we'll provide financing, and we will do it through a phased approach, where the workers say, okay, we inherit this factory. The government has basically given us the title to this abandoned factory, and the government says, okay, if we need, let's say, 50% additional financing, the workers in that cooperative become the owners. Each one owns one share. The government comes in and owns, let's say, provides financing and takes 50% of the shares. And as that enterprise runs, the workers will, out of the income from the cooperative, they will be able to buy out the government's share. And so after many years, the government share will come down to 1%. Government says, okay, well, the provisions of the contract of the government will retain that 1% so that it still has sort of a finger in the cooperative enterprise in case something adverse happens. So that was sort of the model. I mean, it didn't always work that way. Some of these cooperatives ended up failing anyway because of the general adverse economic situation, and then on top of that, sanctions. But this is an example of what happens when the government is favorable to the formation of worker-owned cooperatives, comes in and helps, and then phases its involvement out so that the workers can really take full control. In Cuba, for a long time, as I said, there were only agricultural cooperatives, and so this is one, the Organopónico Vivero Alamar is one of these agricultural cooperatives. It's outside of Havana, east side of Havana, and we were shown how the members of this cooperative would be working like 5 or 6 hours a day. That was the work day for them, 5 days a week, and so they had time for themselves, and you could see it was very productive, and decision making was done in collective meetings, and here you see that the cooperative has a communal kitchen, so this lunch is provided to everyone in the kitchen when they go home. They eat their dinner at home, but it seemed like a model that was working, was sustainable, and it was highly productive. It was certainly highly productive, much more productive than if you compare the labor productivity of this to many of the state farms. But that's a more complex picture, because the state farms were also, a lot of the state farms were on land that was also not as productive, such as these large plantations. Then more recently, it was there was a push, there was a recognition that the economy in Cuba, which was dominated by state enterprises, state ownership, and so it was like even a beauty salon would be owned by the state, and then the government, this is after Fidel stepped down, began thinking, what is the need for the state to own beauty parlors. The important thing is that these small businesses are non-exploited. Okay, so that means that they have to follow certain rules in terms of there are limits to their size. If you have a private enterprise, it basically is a family enterprise, or has maybe just a handful of employees, maximum 20 employees. And so the hairdressers, the hair salons were one of the candidates, along with restaurants and where you open your home to paying guests. So these kinds of businesses, which are small scale, can be privately owned. But then there's another niche here for enterprises that are a little bit bigger, that where it's not limited to a family, and you want to have more employees, and these are logical candidates for becoming worker-owned cooperatives. And so some of them, even the hairdressers have converted to worker-owned cooperatives, even though they only have 4 or 5 members. And it's the laws that were created beginning in 2015 that paved the way for these worker-owned cooperatives outside of agriculture. And before that, there were 2 laws, that the UBPCs and UBP cooperatives in agriculture, but it's the 2015 law, and then the amendments and subsequent laws that have given a legal framework for the creation of urban and non-agricultural worker-owned cooperatives in Cuba. This is an electrical repair shop, just another example of the scale, the type of work that is done in this cooperative. Now, the cooperative that I have the most data for is the largest set of worker-owned cooperatives in the capitalist world, and that is the Mondragon cooperatives. So Mondragon is the Mondragon, the headquarters is located in the Basque Country, which is the 3 red provinces there. And the arrow points to the town of Arasate, Mondragon. So Arasate is the Basque name, Mondragon is the Spanish name. That's why. It's a beautiful area, Basque Country in Spain. And what surprised me is how prosperous it is, because I was thinking of Basque Country in France being a less prosperous area of France, less developed. But in Spain, it's actually, along with Barcelona, a more developed area. It's highly industrialized. It's very hard, and at the same time, it has this beautiful rolling countryside. So this is the town of Arasate, or Mondragon, and probably don't have time to go through all of this, but the founder of Mondragon is Father Jose Maria Mendi, and it goes to 1940s, and the first co-op is created in 1956, and along with that are recognizing that there are all these difficulties in setting up worker-owned cooperatives in a capitalist society, because in Spain at that time did not have all the laws that it has today. They felt that there was a need we need to create a cooperatively owned bank, which is specially structured to provide services to worker-owned cooperatives. There was a recognition that the Spanish social security system at the time was inadequate for the workers, and so they created their own social welfare system called Lavanaro, and so on, and then there's a need for training, because we want to train our workers not just in technology, in job skills, but also in the cooperative mindset about how do we create successful cooperatives, how the decision making, the organizational how to make these institutions work as cooperatives. And then finally, in 1997, creation of the Montreal University as a center for higher education with an emphasis on cooperatives, and then other advanced technology centers, and then so many other businesses. So that today the Montreal cooperatives are a collection of maybe 40 major enterprises, both industrial as well as retail. Yes. So
Is the Mondragon a region or a city, and how big is it population-wise?
I don't remember the population, but Montreal is a city. It's a small city. So I suspect that the city itself is maybe less than 100,000. I'm not sure what the population is.
Thank you.
Yeah. So some of the basic principles are open admission, neutrality, democratic organization, sovereignty of labor, instrumental and subordinate nature of capitalism. In other words, capital is subordinate. Participatory management, wage solidarity, intercooperation, social transformation, universality, education. Nice principles, but here's sort of the bottom line. That in conventional companies, which you see in the third line across, in conventional capitalist companies, the power is, capital is power. Capital, money is power. Capital is power. And what is the factor in production is the labor. So the labor is subordinate to the production process. Workers have no control. In worker-owned cooperatives, the labor is on top. At least that is the principle, and then capital serves the needs of labor in the production process. So that's sort of the principle. Whether it works that way all the time, and it's something that requires active work. We have to apply these principles actively to make them work. What is this sort of governing structure in a cooperative? So in a large cooperative, what we're talking about is an enterprise that has 1,000 employees, 2,000 employees. This is the kind of structure that you might have in that kind of cooperative. So the General Assembly is an assembly of all the members, of all the worker members of that cooperative. And it's like the voters in our society. And so in theory, we're on top as voters, but in practice, Congress does a lot of things that we don't want, or what we want Congress isn't willing to do. So there is still a gap between theory and practice. So we need to be aware of that. And then there's a general manager. So there is still a management structure. So it's not that in an enterprise of 1,000 employees, that it's not that you can get away, you can totally eliminate the management structure. You don't totally eliminate that hierarchy. But what happens is that the gap, or the distance between the worker at the bottom, a worker, for example, who does not have any direct reports, versus the top general manager, is a maximum of 4 layers. There's 4 layers. So now between the worker at the bottom and the general manager, there could be 2 layers of intermediate management in a mother-owned cooperative, as opposed to 10 or 15 at General Motors. So some of the social aspects of the mother-owned cooperatives are solidarity. So there's is a solidarity fund that among the Montreal cooperatives that is a fund that can be drawn upon by other Montreal cooperatives if they need to. In one case, for example, the Favor Automation. There was one cooperative that a few years ago went bankrupt, went out of business. And so some funds were drawn from that emergency fund to help them deal with that crisis, and then also to those funds were used for retraining, for redirecting the workers who were laid off from that company to other Montreal companies or placement outside of Montreal. There's an education fund. There are social funds, of course, contributions to Lagunaro, and so on. So there's a lot that, just within Montreal, and of course, now, Spain has a much better social safety net at the state level than it had in the 1950s. But Montreal still maintains its own social safety nets, above and beyond what are provided by the Spanish state. And this is Montreal companies are competitive. They are, we think of cooperatives first of all as being usually small enterprises and probably not very high tech, but the Montreal is an example that shows that it is possible to be innovative, patents, to invest in research and development, and to have high technology centers. So I'm going to show you one of them. Now, one thing that has been commented about the Montreal system is that they do not believe in labor unions. And this is something that I would say is debatable. Even in Cuba, you have a socialist system, but in Cuba there are trade unions, right? So trade unions are another layer of oversight. And the good thing about trade unions is that they have no tie whatsoever to any kind of management. And so even if you have a worker-owned cooperative, there still is I believe, a role for labor unions, but it's not, of course, as pressing a need as it would be in a capitalist corporation. So this is sort of some of the pillars upon which the Montreal cooperative stand with the welfare system, the educational support, the financial infrastructure through the cooperative banks, and then the R&D centers. Now this is one of the Montreal companies, Favor Arasate Stamping, and this is the engineering room where engineers are designing things for production, and this is the factory floor. These are very expensive, sophisticated, and a lot of these are also highly computer controlled kinds of machinery. And I'm just going to go through these quickly to give you some idea of the scale of the manufacturing here, and the investment that is involved, the skills that are required. This is really truly competitive on the world scale. And then there is a consumer cooperative, which operates a chain of supermarkets called Eroski. And so its governing council is a little more complex because it is a cooperative both of the workers and of the consumers. So you've got two kinds of members, you've got consumer members and you've got worker members. But this is what it looks like. It looks like just like a modern, like a Target, basically. And it has a presence of, well, actually, most of the presence of Mondragon in the other states of Spain is the retail and banking branches. There's some manufacturing in other parts of Spain, but most of it is concentrated in the Basque region. And in the world, they also have manufacturing centers in quite a few countries. So there are, when I visited, there were 14,000 employees in other countries. Now, the interesting thing is that these other factories outside of Spain are not organized as worker-owned cooperatives. So, and part of that is because, you know, in most of these places, and even China, there are no laws to govern the formation of worker-owned cooperatives. So, so that's one limitation why their overseas facilities are not, by and large, cooperatively organized. This is the, you know, about the cooperative bank. The social fund. This is the main office of Lacan. Training centers, we have all these various training centers. It's just one specialized training center.
They got good food.
Good food, great architecture too. Okay. So this is you know, a worker from automation, the company that went bankrupt, telling the story about what happened. But she's telling the story of how she was treated, how she was, you know, given assistance to get another job, and you know, she didn't lose any income. And, so basically the Mondragon cooperatives, the Mondragon family took care of her in that transition. So this is the one that went bankrupt. So what is the impact of cooperatives? Well, you know, this is not a direct cause and effect, but you know, these are the indications. So this is unemployment, a measure of unemployment. So the unemployment, the white region is the lowest, you know, category of unemployment in Spain. And so that's the Basque region. Basque region is the lowest unemployment. It has the highest participation of worker-owned cooperatives. So there's a correlation there. Even though it's not, I mean, at least what I'm giving you, I don't have the data to prove that there's a direct cause and effect there, but there's a correlation. Now, I want to just relate to you a little bit about my experience in India. And the Indian cooperatives are not actually very well developed, but there are some sectors that are quite significant, that are, you know, officially classified as cooperatives, in the sense that they have some kind of cooperative structure. But you see the limitations. So this is a cooperative society, and it's an example of where the decision making is made in a meeting by the members of the cooperative. This is just simply a retail. It's basically a shop that sells foodstuffs, and the members of the cooperative, meet to make decisions. And this is in a village. This is in a village where I spent 6 months. I spent 6 months in this village because I was there to document the next thing, which is the cooperative sugar industry. So in the largest amount of sugar production, this is sugarcane production in India is in the north. But the factories in the north are privately owned for the most part. What has happened is that in the west, particularly in the state of Maharashtra, which is the state in which Mumbai is located, has a very strong cooperative movement in the sugar sector. So almost all of the sugar factories in Maharashtra state are cooperatives. Okay? I'll tell you how they are cooperatives. They're cooperatives in the sense that they're not worker-owned ones. They are cooperatives that are, at least on paper, are owned by the farmers who produce the sugarcane around that factory. They come together, form a society, and a cooperative society that agrees to build and operate a sugar factory. The sugar factory itself is conventionally organized in the sense that it has a general manager, it has a hierarchy of managers, chemists, and then various levels of workers, but it does take advantage of the cooperative financing that's available in the state, because the cooperative movement is strong. There are these facilities, and the cooperative movement has political power. So, for example, the patron of this sugar mill, the Walwa, so Sahakari Sakar Karkhana means, Sahakari is cooperative, Sakar means sugar, and then Karkhana is factory. So the Walwa cooperative sugar factory. Patron of it is a member of neither the member of the state legislature or member of parliament. I mean, of course, they can be either, but a lot of these people are politicians, so they have political power. What you see in front is the third layer. You got the farmers, you got the workers in the factory, and the third layer are these huts in front, which are the huts of the sugarcane cutters. And they are neither owners nor are they workers in the factory. They are paid on a piece rate, and they are at the bottom of the hierarchy in terms of labor. So it's not an ideal situation, but anyway, let's go through it. So this is one of the signs at the entrance to the factory. What it says, the pink line says spirits. So you can go and there's a shop that sells spirits that are made in the distillery from the molasses that are produced by the factory. And then Deshi Daru is the country liquor, the blue line, and then the bottom is acetone. So acetone probably includes other chemicals that can be distilled from molasses. Now, these are the farmers. So these are the ones who are cooperative members, and they are coming here to the payment windows when their sugarcane gets delivered. They go to these windows to get paid for the sugarcane that was delivered. Look, pay attention to their dress. So you see that this is a lot of them are in the sort of traditional dress. The the kameez dhoti is a traditional dress in the countryside, and then this cap, this white cap. And so that becomes also the dress of many of the politicians. Now you notice that the sugarcane cutters who actually carry the cane are dressed much more poorly, so that they don't have the same level of living, and also the migrants. So they set up huts. They have to live in those huts for months at a time. And then the workers in the factories. So this is the worker who's adjusting the weight of a bag. This is supposed to be a 100-kilogram bag, very heavy. So you see workers dressed in different ways. You see some workers are dressed in button-down shirts, collared shirts. So these are workers who have education and skill. Some of them are like chemists, engineers, and then others who are laborers, and you see them in just t-shirts and shorts. So this is, it's like when I went there, just by looking at them, you know sort of what is their position in the hierarchy. And this is more true in the north and less in the south. Here's a chemist, so you see how he's dressed. The quality control lab, and then the bottle washer. So these bottles are reused for the country liquor. And then here you see this confluence of three different types of people. You see the laborers. These are the coolies, probably one of the lowest levels of labor, because they don't even have a shirt, and they're barefoot, and then the man in the collared shirt is a manager who's doing some kind of accounting for delivery, and then this man in the white pant, he's a trader, and so he's one who's taking the delivery of bags of sugar, take it to the market. So different people having different occupations and then having different kinds of dress. Very characteristic of the old Indian, and so is one of the underpinnings of the caste system. Okay, so analysis. So now capital. I mentioned to you about capitalist enterprise at the beginning, where Marx pointed out about the capitalist or the owner of production at the very top. If we look at this diagram on the far left, the capitalist is on top. He or she is the owner of capital, and on the bottom are the workers, the sellers of labor power. Now, I have formulated back in the 80s a class analysis that provides for intermediate classes, and one of them is the managerial classes, because they have a certain degree of autonomy that workers do not have, because they have a certain amount of decision-making power. The question is, how do you characterize that? You characterize that as something, as a qualitative feature, as Marx would require for a class. A feature of a class cannot be something that is quantitative, it has to be qualitative. And that is that measure of control of decision-making power. The next one down, the knowledge workers. The qualitative feature of knowledge workers is that they're selling not just labor power, but they're selling knowledge power as well, right? So the engineers have a skill, and that skill is instead of adding, every hour of work that the engineer does, so an hour of work by a laborer adds a certain incremental amount to the value of production. The work of an engineer, on the other hand,
is multiplied through the workers in the production process. So that's why the capitalist system values an engineer more than a manual laborer. What happens and then the sort of idealized notion of a worker-owned cooperative is that circle in the third column. So it's just all the workers in the cooperative are equal, and they have an equal say. There's no hierarchy. That's an idealized worker cooperative, but that can only happen on a small scale. So what happens in the case of worker-owned is that there is a management hierarchy, as you see in the far right, where the managers, including the general manager, have some authority over the operations of the enterprise, but they are accountable to the workers at the bottom. So that's why the circular construct. And then the SOE is the state-owned enterprise. So the state-owned enterprise is basically a capitalist enterprise without the owners, in the sense that the state is the owner. So the state is not appropriating the surplus from that enterprise to individuals. It is appropriating it to the state for use in the entire country. I mean, if it's not corrupt, then that appropriation benefits everyone in society. That's the theory, and that's why the class structure of the state-owned enterprise comes out like that. It's a decapitated capitalist relation of production. Now, what about the case of the sugar factory, the cooperative sugar factory? It's just an example of complexity. So this is my attempt to give it a class diagram, and I probably will modify this, as I go forward. It's not perfect. This is a works in progress. So the factory itself is on the left, where you have the managers, the knowledge workers, and then the workers at the bottom. But you also have the farmers who are the members of that cooperative. The Dada is this politician who is the patron of the factory and has a lot of political power, and then the migrant sugarcane cutters who are sort of off to the side and have neither the employment benefits of the factory. They don't have any kind of employment stability, and then they have no permanence of residence, because they're constantly on the move. So but they have a connection. They have a connection in the relation of production to both the farmer members and to the factory. That's the interesting thing. So anyway, this is a works in progress. So so that is it for my talk. I would say that there's a lot more work that needs to be done to theorize, create a viable and comprehensive theory of worker-owned cooperatives, and more importantly, from a practical perspective, worker-owned cooperatives, I think, are a viable alternative to the capitalist system that do not necessarily, we don't have to have a revolution to do this. We can start today to create alternatives within our present-day society. We can create alternatives to capitalism, and that's a much easier path than making a revolution. So it doesn't mean that a revolution isn't necessary, but there are things that we can do, and that organizations like Human Agenda are doing. It's a very small piece of the economy, but as a movement grows, we can make it a bigger and bigger part of our economy and create a more equitable society. Thank you. Yes.
Sylvia.
I have a comment to make. As we in the society develop different types of co-ops, some are small, some are big. When you are big, it was necessary to have a hierarchy, some management, because not all 10,000 people can come to the meeting. So it's necessary. So it's reflecting the corporate model. Now, within the corporate model, since corporation, they are created supposedly to benefit the society. Otherwise, they should not be in existence. If we could put principles such as the solidarity, the sharing principle onto the corporation, so that they would allocate 10% for research, 10% for education of their workers. Many of them are doing that, many of them. What they are not doing is the sharing of the profit. So if for some political will, we can impose that sharing to go part of it to the people who are working on a different level. You probably would get different levels, but the upper management or the creators or the inventors gets more, but something should trickle down. Then the society will be a whole lot more equal, and we don't have to reinvent a lot of different things. In reality, some company owners are doing that. I know of, it's not huge company, but they automatically, many companies in Taiwan, at the end of the year, they look at their profit and they will give it to the workers. So at the end of the year, you get sometimes 2 more months of salary, sometimes 6 months, sometimes 8 months, depending on the profit. It's a matter of profit sharing. So if for some reason we can instill that spirit into all the owners or all the companies, we'd be really in good shape.
Yeah, that's part of it, and I think that the only way that it would be universalized is if there were, there were a structure that would mandate it. I mean, it's because if it's voluntary, only some are going to do it, right?
Yeah, we need to somehow have the political will to modify the corporate rule, incorporation rule to require that.
Right. Now, many corporations would argue that through stock option plans, that they already do that they already do profit sharing by providing stock options to their at least their technical employees. So
perhaps those are limited, they are percentage wise, so they can increase the percentage wise and widen the spread.
So that again, that there's a need to put pressure either through mandates, through legal mandates, or other means to get corporations to do this for all their employees, and also to counter the trend, which we see now of large companies, including many of the tech companies, outsourcing a lot of the things that used to be done by employees. For example, cafeteria workers, janitors, these are all being outsourced. So that as soon as it's outsourced, these kinds of work are outsourced, there's no possibility of profit sharing for those employees. What we need is to make that profit sharing universal for anyone who creates value for that corporation. They need to have some share in the profit. But the other thing that's still missing is of course the democratic decision making. And that is something that has never been there in corporate America. And I mean, even at the shareholder level, right? It's a normal question. At the shareholder level, you have
shareholders meetings and if there's a green, for example, resolution presented by a shareholder, then management will almost always recommend a no vote. And they almost always win because there's no counter recommendation. So there's no democracy in corporations at the shareholder level, or and certainly not at the level of workers. That is something that I think can only happen if that corporation is restructured as a worker-owned cooperative.
Well, another comment. I actually see some hopes that the number of worker-owned cooperatives will be on the increase, in that during this pandemic, suddenly people realized that even the person that is sweeping the floor has value. So the workers are recognizing that they have value. And if that awakening will make them take power, because before they think that everybody can sweep, but nowadays not everyone wants to sweep the floor.
Right.
Well, the democratization can sort of happen. I think of the early Ben and Jerry's, where Ben and Jerry were talking about how they insisted that every member worker know how to scrub the toilets, knew how to go out and do the gardening outside the factory so that they were, you know, the landscaping was kept up. Every worker had to know how to make ice cream. Every worker had to know how to do the till, you know, the money situation. Everybody had to do some office work, so that there was a great sense of sharing. And also, one of the ways they sort of marketed their early idea for a small co-op was, you'll never be bored because you'll be doing so many different things. You'll develop so many different skills. But the empathy that you feel when you are scrubbing a toilet, you know, that your boss, I mean, Ben or Jerry, I mean, they scrub toilets too, once a week. They you know, their whole workforce was spread out over all the tasks, and they had a roster that they tried to follow in terms of actual labor. And that's a real democratizing tool, is to say, we're all in this together. We all scrub the toilets. We all make the ice cream, hopefully not on the same day. But, and yeah, and we all learn office skills. We all learn all of these different skills so that we increase our skill set at the same time that we're earning a living. So I was very impressed by that. And I was terribly sad when Ben and Jerry's went corporate. However that happened, I don't even know. So, but I just wanted to say, the democratization almost has to have the component of knowing what it is to sweep. And unless, I mean, unless you have some kind of a physical disability that doesn't allow you to bend over to wash a toilet or to sweep, or some kind of a mental disability that doesn't allow you to do mathematics, to be able to take in the money and so on. I mean, obviously, we have to make exceptions for those things.
Yeah.
In relation to that, one of your graphs showed, I think it was the cooperative. This one? No? There, okay. Well, one of your graphs showed the worker co-op didn't even have a worker level.
Oh.
So that, it was back one there, yeah, the worker, the
Well-
one on the, well, the two on the right don't have the worker level. Then who's doing the work? The essential worker.
Well, okay, so, yeah, I mean, what I meant is really to collapse the last two categories into one, which is that the people who are the workers here are, they are workers doing the work, but they also have knowledge because they participate in the
Okay.
decision making. So that's why I
Yeah.
diagrammed it that way. But it's meant to include the manual labor aspect there. But yeah, I mean, you know, this is about creating a corporate culture that honors all types of labor. So I'm delighted to learn this about Ben and Jerry's, but I think what happens as a company gets bigger and bigger, then there is a necessary specialization of labor in order to do production on a large scale or to do it on a large scale geographically. But you know, it's I can only say that it's you know, the kind of training that we need to create viable worker-owned cooperatives is not just about how we have meetings and make decisions, but also, I mean, you know, things like teaching people to value all kinds of labor. All labor contributes value to the corporation, and we have to honor that labor, honor the people who do that labor. One of the ways to do that is to actually do some of it, you know, where it's practical. To actually, everyone should do some manual labor. And I agree with that. The organizations that I work with, I've done a lot of the manual labor, even laying the floor in our peace center. Yes.
Here's the question from someone on the Zoom. As you get more interrelation of participation in various roles in a business, it would seem to the extent there is a need for some management hierarchy. That level could be rotated as well. Shall I repeat that? As you get more interrelation of participation in various roles in a business, it would seem to the extent there is a need for some management hierarchy, that level could be rotated as well. Do you know whether this has been addressed in the Montreal region?
That's a good question. So I have not explored with them, you know, to what extent the you know, managerial posts are rotated. I mean, there is obviously there's you know, there are changes of personalities in these positions. I mean, what you could say is that in a Montreal-owned company, it's not like a conventional, you know, capitalist corporation where there's a long hierarchy. In other words, the capitalist hierarchy is a long ladder, where there are many rungs on the ladder. So you know, they talk about climbing the management ladder. And in a Montreal-owned company, if there are only maximum 4 layers, there isn't much climbing to do. And so if there's a change of management, it has to be more more of what you say, you know, rotation. And, so I can't answer that question specifically as to whether they have a policy to do that. But it seems that there isn't that much of a choice. In other words, there aren't that many rungs of the ladder to climb vertically in a Montreal company. So I suppose that would be a reason for rotating rather than climbing.
Thank you. There's one more question here. Is there an organization that can help advocate / broker to advise or assist in creating local co-ops? Could a city hire a broker to help create employee-owned co-ops? The point is to build community through experimental economic opportunity and equity.
Well, so some of the resources that are available, of course, the U.S. Federation of Cooperatives is one, and you know, they have resources, and they can also point anyone who's interested in forming a cooperative or converting a conventional business into a worker-owned cooperative. Human Agenda is also developing or has some expertise in doing these conversions and also in creating worker-owned cooperatives from scratch. So they are a resource which is local to the Bay Area, humanagenda.net. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that, and then also there are the other cooperative businesses around. So one thing that we find is that because cooperative businesses like Mendi Bakery are so proud of their business model, you know, they are proud to share what they have learned in developing their business. It's not like a regular private enterprise where everything want to keep everything to themselves, and you know, whatever knowledge they have, they want to just hoard it. I think that one of the things that I found is that cooperative businesses have been more than others have been willing to share their information, and they are genuinely committed to growing the cooperative movement. And so they are also resources. So if you know of a cooperative business, go and talk to them, and I'm sure that they will be happy to spend some time with you.
I have one question, and it's about the Montreal University. What is the curriculum? Is it engineering? Is it bringing the manufacturing plants into production again, or is it regarding co-ops, the structure and incubation or whatever concerning the operation of a co-op?
Well, I think it's all of them, all of those, and a lot more. I don't have the curriculum in front of me, but as a university, I mean, it's not like a technical school, which is you know, maybe very focused, but so that they have specializations which are both technical as well as organizational or industrial. I mean, they are there to enhance research and development, education, that you know, all aspects that support cooperatives. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, it occurs to me that one of the reasons Marxism maybe has failed is because basically it says from each according to his ability, to each according to his need. So we acknowledge, I mean, that's a very beneficent sort of framework. Everybody has basic needs. Everybody's needs are basically the same. But if you take the first part from each according to his ability. Well, unless somebody really has a disability, we're all very much gifted in terms of we could be more generalists than we are. We tend to get very specialized in our trajectory. And then, of course, there's the hierarchical assessment of, you know, my particular talent means that I'm smarter than you are. So I like the idea, for instance, that college curriculums insist that even if you're going to get a business degree, you have to take a certain amount of science, you have to take a certain amount of math, you have to take a certain amount of government classes, so you understand the government, you have to take humanities. And this is to hopefully turn you into somebody who is capable of doing things, many things, and tying it all together and seeing the whole rather than just this specialized thing. And I know it's not always practical. Like we need people who are specialists in putting up solar panels, and that to learn to do that probably takes quite a long time. And you know, so anyway, I'm just saying that what communism, where it's failed, is that it has allowed, I think, for this hierarchical thing. The workers that are just peasants, that's all they're good for is growing the crops. And then there's a manager class, and then there's, you know, these other classes. But that's why I think it failed, is because it doesn't acknowledge that each of us can learn to do many different things.
Well, yeah, yes and no. So the there, you know, the one has to also understand that the economic position of these societies of Russia in the early part of the 20th century, China in its state of development at mid-century, was that these were very, you know, economically, in terms of the forces of production, these were very backward economies. And there were not, you know, so many options for unemployment, for training. The educational systems were not very developed, and so that is the context that we have to see them coming up in. And it isn't, I mean, we do see that they honored individuals. I mean, China, for example, was one of the features of the great proletarian cultural revolution was the value of valuing manual labor. And so a lot of people still, you know, criticize this, that we waste a lot of time by sending these engineers and doctors to the countryside to do farm labor for 2 weeks. But they learned something. They learn how to that the farmer's labor is something that has value. But the failure is the, I mean, I think that one of the failures is not immediately, you know, creating avenues for the formation of worker-owned cooperatives that are much more egalitarian to start with, because there's local control. It's very hard to do that on a national scale with state-owned enterprises. And then the others were the imperatives of war, of how do you gear up for war production? How do you rebuild countries in North Korea? They were just totally devastated. And so the governance structures were not that emerged were far from ideal. But the other thing is that this is not the fault of Marxists. Let's make a distinction between what emerged in the Soviet Union, what happened in North Korea. Is that these were structures that emerged out of struggle. They were under these emerging countries were under constant threat from the West, and they had to rebuild, and and also they had a historical legacy of monarchy, and it takes time to overcome that. And that is not to be equated with Marxism. Marxism as a theory that I think correctly analyzed the nature of capitalism and capital and labor as of the end of the 19th century. And a lot has happened since then. So, we have to take that theory and continue to evolve it to address the social economic structures of today. So, yes, but in general, you're right. Yes. Sylvia.
Well, can you comment on the psychology that is quite prevalent in today's society, that people want to get up, excel, go on the next step, get promoted? Now, with a worker cooperation, one of the running principle is that everybody is equal. Of course, the skills are not equal, because I could never learn how to fly to the moon. And so there is a psychology of wanting to go up, to be better, to get to the next step. Is that artificial, that we can retrain people so that they don't push for that? Because in the co-op, I see that that is a hindrance.
You mean, are you saying that in a co-op there isn't the scope for achieving or being recognized for something that is much higher, better? No, I think that first of all, your life in the co-op or the enterprise is one aspect of your life, right? So and there are opportunities for training. Like in Montreal, there are the facilities for training people for positions of higher skill or different skills. So people can pursue that training. They can make lateral transitions within the Montreal companies or even outside, as a consequence of that training. So it depends on what people aspire to. But in terms of whether someone in a worker-owned cooperative aspires to be the managing director, say, I don't know. I mean, there's training for cooperative management, right? And if you look at the Montreal model, there is a slight hierarchy, and there are avenues for member workers to move into these levels of management. But then the other thing, of course, is your private life. You have you work fewer hours in most European countries than you do in the certainly than in high tech, And in many countries, it's, you know, the statutory work week is maybe 35, 36 hours. So you have a personal life also where you can, you know, pursue your other interests. I don't know whether that addresses your question.
In the co-ops you have observed, are people paid the same by hour? Or there's a differentiation on what different jobs they do, they get paid differently?
Yeah, no, there is pay differentiation. There's pay differentiation based mostly on experience, you know, years of work. There is some pay differentiation based upon you know, skills or training coming into the cooperative, but these are relatively small. So, for example, the pay ratio of the lowest to the highest salary in a Montreal company is maybe 3 to 1. So it's not 1, but I'm saying it's about 3 is the maximum. And but that, you know, that's still a lot less than 50 to 1, 100 to 1 in a private corporation, right? Yeah. So I mean, yeah, I mean, so that is another thing that people can look forward to is that with more experience they get a certain increment in pay.
There are no more questions on Zoom or in the room here, but we thank you very much for coming down from San Jose and for sharing your firsthand observations and knowledge and insights about about economic, cooperative economics. So thank you very much, Dr. Lin.
It was a pleasure to come here. Meet all of you. Thank you very much.